Mayor, City Council, Mr. Reeves, I appreciate you guys giving me the time to meet with you today to talk about the budget request. And again, Sheriff Smith sends his regards. He's not going to be here. I talked to him earlier. He did give me a little comment to maybe present to you at the end. You know, he's obviously passionate about the contract, about being the sheriff of the county, and his expectations of our law enforcement service that we provide, not only to the residents of the county, but the residents of Eagle Mountain specifically. So I'll address that later. Again, please forgive his absence, and I appreciate you letting me take a little bit of time. What I want to talk about today, I kind of gave a similar presentation a little over a year ago, or around this time frame. For those of you that weren't here as council members then, some of it will be new. Some of you that were here before, it'll be stuff you're familiar with to a certain extent. I'll just kind of cut to the chase and get to what I'm requesting, and it's about some staffing plan needs for the sheriff's office here at Eagle Mountain. I leave this slide up. It's the beginning one. It's kind of what we do. I won't read it to you verbatim, but the top line is important, and I think it's very important. We are your police department, and we provide police services to the citizens of Eagle Mountain. We've done so since the inception of Eagle Mountain, and now it's an official contract. We are not called out here daily for calls for service. We are assigned out here. We have an actual office space that we utilize. We have 35 sworn law enforcement officers and some administrative staff. So let me get to that right here. This is who we are in a nutshell. We are the Eagle Mountain Division of the Sheriff's Office. You have a chief deputy, that's me. Then you have a lieutenant, you have an officer specialist, and you have 5 sergeants. One is our admin sergeant, and the other 4 are patrol sergeants, and they each have 4 deputies assigned to them. And then you have 1 victim advocate, 2 special victims, 2 property crime detectives, for a total of 4 detectives and the victim advocate. Also, under Sergeant Max Morgan, you also have 3 coordinators who deal with things like our RAD program, and then you have the VIPs, the volunteers in patrol. Down to the bottom right, it tells you kind of what our exact staffing is. Tell you kind of the layout. Our current service demand and coverage is 77,000 people, is approximately maybe just a little hair less than that, 76 number, maybe even we're over 77 now. 50.3 square miles. We do run a 24/7 patrol operations. We have 4 patrol teams, as I mentioned, 1 sergeant, 4 deputies per shift. We run 12-hour shifts, basically a day and a night. They rotate about every 2 months. The teams will go to day shift for 2 months and then back to graveyards for 2 months. We have 2 animal control deputies. We have 2 traffic enforcement, for a total of 24 patrol officers on duty or as part of our contract. Now, at the bottom of that, you see some numbers. What happened last year after this presentation was given was the request, and it was the correct request, to give you not just a number of officers per 1,000 as why we need to expand, but what's our workload? What's the workload of the deputies that are assigned to work out here? And so I did do a workload study, or at least I went through one and tried to do it the best I could and get as accurate as I can. But I wanted you to see these numbers because I want you to kind of understand just a simple number, whether we need more or not. This number reflects how many people are assigned out here. At the current number of sworn officers, we have 0.45 officers per 1,000, or 1 per 2,200 residents. Lehigh City has 0.7, or 1 per 1,429. They're at about 100,000, maybe a little bit more than 100,000 people. Saratoga Springs and / Bluffdale. I added Bluffdale because I was asked the question a while ago of what those actual numbers are, but they are at about 1 per 1,000. If you divide them up, I think there's 14 patrol officers that are assigned to Bluffdale, and then there's another 60-something officers that are assigned to full-time Saratoga Springs. So they're at this. Saratoga Springs itself is about 0.9 per 1,000. Bluffdale is about 0.7 per 1,000, but combined they're about one officer per 1,000 for the total population of both cities. They're close by. That's why I'm including them. I want you to kind of see what the surrounding cities have. As part of that workload study, Lehigh City did one at the request of their city council members. They referred to the ICMA, which is the International City Council Management Association. I referred to the same thing. We have something similar in law enforcement, the International Association of Chiefs of Police, that also gives some standards when it comes to law enforcement services in a city. Some of the things that the ICMA talks about in their initial study is what's called the Rule of 60. The Rule of 60 is your patrol allocation. The Rule of 60 in this case says 60 of the sworn should be assigned, 60% of the sworn should be assigned to patrol. Currently, we have 68.5% assigned to patrol here in Eagle Mountain, which puts us above the benchmark. However, we are light in administration, supervision, investigations, and community outreach programs with the city. But we are light on admin, but we are slightly heavy on regular patrol. The ICMA refers to the 75% rule or 75% availability, and what they're talking about that basically is what it says in the parentheses, meaning roughly 25% of the officers are unavailable to given shift due to court and leave and training. Again, we're talking about authorized versus what's really deployable. We are authorized 24 guys on patrol, but what you actually patrol with is about the 75% range, because a lot of the guys are called to do different things, whether they're on sick leave, FMLA, whether they're in court, and things like that. So even though we're authorized at 24 effectively, our deployment strength is consistently lowered due to leave, injuries, training, specialty commitments. That's not unique to Eagle Mountain. That is just law enforcement in general. And so we, at Eagle Mountain, we try to maintain 4 deputies on shift at a time. A lot of times as we move forward doing that, the calls for services requiring us to use a little bit more overtime to call in deputies to work those shifts. So our workload study, we have 25,000, or last year we had 25,699 or 98 total calls for service. That's an 18.6 increase of calls for service from the year prior.
Eric?
Yes, sir.
Is that commensurate with the growth? Or
Excuse me, say.
That number, do you think like that's commensurate with the overall growth of the citizens, or do you feel like that's an increase in just actual crime?
It's an increase with the citizens. I'll go out on a quick tangent real quick. Eagle Mountain City's safe, and I hope that's not being presented differently. Sometimes I'll read in social media, we're turning into, I hate to use a city like West Valley, but they say things like that. I think West Valley City is relatively safe too. They have their share of problems, but Eagle Mountain is not West Valley City. We don't have that crime rate. We are one of the safest cities in the state of Utah. You have citizen increase, which is creating more calls for service, both law enforcement initiated and calls for service from the citizens itself, from 911 calls and other various ways that they call into the sheriff's office to get assistance. So I would say that's attributed more to population growth. So that it comes out to about 70 incidents per day. That's 32 minutes average per incident, 38 hours per day spent handling calls for service. And I tell you this simply because this plays into the workload study. This doesn't include the backup units. When you do this study, you're trying to get as much real data as possible. There's only so much our computer systems can provide that we can analyze. We have to guesstimate on the rest. I chose not to guesstimate too much information on there. I didn't want to throw in the number of backup officers coming to a call if I didn't have the right answer for you, so I simply plugged in the data that I had. It didn't include the backup units. It didn't include report time or travel time to a call, but also travel time checking on duty, coming to work, and checking off duty and leaving work. And so the sheriff's office, the deputies check on duty from their homes, get in their vehicles, and drive to work, and they are paid for that travel time coming into work.
Just a follow-up question with the backup officers. Generally speaking, there's a protocol, I'm assuming, the number of backup officers that come depending on the type of call that it is.
I wouldn't list it as a protocol, but generally just for officer safety, we want to try to, depending on the call, we want at least 2 there. If you have a domestic violence, typically the deputy that shows up on scene, if he's not hearing an obvious reason he needs to go in by himself, he will wait for a backup officer. Very typical of a domestic violence call, because we know through experience those are some of the most dangerous calls we respond to.
I just want to make some assumptions here. Maybe this is helpful to you. So if you have 4 officers on duty and 3 of them are on a single call, we now have one person to answer the next call, and then have to start parsing out, correct?
It's very common, and not only is it common just for the type of calls, but take a DUI, for instance. That's just another example. If you have a DUI, you make an arrest, the only jail facility that's close to us is Spanish Fork. So now you're going to lose him for an hour to drive down there, half hour for booking and an hour to come back. So you're going to lose people. You may get 3 on a call and have 1 available, and there are a lot of times where you won't have anybody available, and we sometimes will call on either the North County unit or surrounding agency to come assist us on that call. So that happens quite frequently. So the ICMA talks about the workload, and the number that they focus on is what's called the saturated index. In other words, your staffing needs. It's the total number of officers committed to calls per hour divided by the total officers' time available per hour. They give this standard here. This came through ICMA itself. It said if is consistently under 50%, you're likely your staffing is cushioned. If you're at about 50 to 60%, you are properly staffed. If you run over 60% for sustained periods, you are understaffed. In our case, running the numbers, our patrol saturation level is about 65 to 70% average during most periods and higher during peak hours. Peak hours vary, but typically peak hours on afternoon and in the weekends. Typically you run into about the 3 in the afternoon till about 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Usually you're dealing with traffic at that time when people are coming and going. You also have peak times in the morning as well. But typically we're at about 65 to 70% work saturation or saturation index. That's what the level is. Our deputies are spending most of their available time responding to calls, which limits their ability to do proactive work. And I'll get into more later about what I'm talking about proactive work. But so the question becomes, how many do we need? It's a tricky question, and obviously I think this is why I was asked to look at a workload, take the workload stance to find out what kind of work they're doing and not just base it off officers per 1,000 residents. And I think that's wise. I think the International Chiefs of Police Association is suggesting the same thing. But based on our call volume, our staffing level per shift, Eagle Mountain needs about 5 to 6 deputies per shift as a minimum. We run about 4. Assigned to patrol, we should have about 32 to 34 deputies assigned to patrol. That keeps us at that cushioned level. An overall increase of about 8 to 10 deputies for patrol is what we need to have. Industry best practices focus on maintaining enough deputies on duty to handle calls while still allowing proactive police and safe backup. Proactive police, we're talking about community outreach programs. We're talking about the ability to work on neighborhood issues on a more long-term basis. We work shift work. A deputy working the day, working with a citizen on a particular project might spend a day with them and then transfer to day shift, and now this person has to deal with another officer. So what we're trying to do as part of my request is going to be for a couple of full-time community-oriented police officers that can be out there working on long-term community issues. That's part of the patrol staffing plan to increase patrol, but increase by 2 guys that I can use for strict proactive work to help with quality of life in neighborhoods. We're having that now. You have a lot of complaints that come forward. One of the conversations I had with the sheriff had to do with, he was here last night on a meeting, and it's visibility of law enforcement in the community. Eagle Mountain's lacking there. We're lacking on having our deputies getting out to areas because now they're becoming more inundated with calls for service. Now, when we talk about calls for service, even keep in mind, there's still part of that calls for service number is some proactive work. Now, we're talking traffic stops. We increased over the last couple of years our traffic unit to 2 full-time traffic units that help with calls as well when they can, but they are doing traffic enforcement. And as you probably saw, some of you that see the numbers, that number has increased on traffic enforcement. They are out being very proactive, and they're writing a lot of tickets, but they're being pulled off also to handle calls when regular deputies are tied up. So that's what the need is. Go ahead.
You mentioned the community policing and being proactive and different things like that. And we hear up here on the dais quite a bit from residents when people are doing different things, and we hear little pockets of it throughout the city. And you're here when we hear those things. Are there any of those common concerns that are expressed by your residents that are very unique and would be great for community policing to help tackle some of them? So like e-bikes, some of those other things that we're hearing from people?
So great question. One of the discussions that have been made or that are being had is how do you enforce city ordinance? And how does Utah County Sheriff's Office enforce city ordinance? And I know the discussion came up about getting our city ordinances onto the computer system that allows Utah County Justice Court to actually file charges and for us to actually issue citations for some of these city ordinance violations. You don't have that right now. The question is, who does that, and how does that happen? And how do we create city ordinances to meet the needs of the citizens of the community? A couple community-oriented police officers now have the time and ability to work with Marcus and work with others to get these city ordinances on the SMOT, the Master Offense Table, so it can be prosecuted in justice court. Two proactive guys have the ability to do that. Two proactive, I say guys, I mean law enforcement officers. Two law enforcement officers can go into the communities. They can work with problem areas. Oftentimes, you guys will hear up in, from the citizens here about problems in their neighborhood, whether it be stop sign violations, speeders, and things like that, and that they don't see law enforcement there. Their complaint is valid, and sometimes we don't have the time to go into certain communities and to target traffic enforcement in these areas, and I say or because traffic enforcement is a temporary Band-Aid. What really needs to happen is a permanent fix. And you need a couple guys that can work with the citizens, that can work with our traffic engineers, that can work with people to permanently resolve the issues that are happening in these neighborhoods, whether that be through speed humps, traffic design, whether that be putting up more stop signs or whatever. It's permanent solutions that you could have a couple law enforcement officers work on. And it's a way to get them to also help enforce those code violations or the traffic violations. And again, so we hear about it, and their complaints are legitimate. A couple proactive guys, I think, are going to make a huge impact in that area for Eagle Mountain right now. Eagle Mountain is lacking in that area where enough proactive time or finding enough officers to spend proactive time on it. I hope that answered your question.
I think that's really helpful because as we look at budget and everything else, it's helpful for us to respond back to the residents and say, we've heard you and your concerns about X, Y, and Z. And one of the reasons why we're proposing this is because it will help us address X, Y, and Z. So that was helpful. Thank you.
Every citizen in this community, not just Eagle Mountain, but I think everywhere around the country has an expected level of service from law enforcement. They expect something in their community. And as city council members, they're expecting you to kind of go to bat for that, to make sure that we as law enforcement officers are taking care of problems in their city. And oftentimes you need somebody that can spend some time on that, not just a phone call and maybe stop by for 5 or 10 minutes and sick a traffic unit on it. That's not going to resolve the problem permanently. And I think full-time officers, community-oriented policing type officers can go in there and help resolve these issues. So I'll go on with this. So based on the workload study, an increase of 11 to 13 sworn total is what we're looking at, what we need. Right now, we're too lean. We're not failing. We're not collapsing. We can still take calls. Eagle Mountain is a safe place. It continues to be a safe place. But if the manpower needs are not addressed, you run the risk of this turning into something that it shouldn't be. Citizens should not have to call in and get an automated voicemail system about filing reports. They should be able to talk to somebody. And that's expected by the public. We don't want to turn into a big city. I think that is not the direction Eagle Mountain wants to go. I think the citizens moved out here for a reason, and I think we should give them the proper level of law enforcement services. We're lean, and in this case, lean means fragile, and I think it's something we need to pay attention to. Let me back up. I didn't read that last one to you. In short, based this estimate is based on shift coverage requirements, realistic availability, reductions, population size, geographical responsibility, and daily call volume, not on national averages. And why I put that in there is I just want to make it clear that in another slide later, I refer back to the officers per thousand. I'm not doing that from a standpoint of you need to have 0.7 or you need to have 1 officer per thousand. You don't. Eagle Mountain City does not need that number yet. Will it one day? I hope not. I hope you don't get to the point where crime requires you to have 1 per thousand, or the traffic here that may require that. Now you're on track, you're growing, and but I think we need to keep up with the needs of what you have right now. Do I think 0.7 is the number? No, but I'll tell you what I do think the number is here in a minute. This covers the 2 slides. These 2 slides cover the needs that I'm asking for. I'm asking for 1 patrol deputy per team. That's 4 for patrol deputies. I'm asking for 2 community police officers and a sergeant. Now, the sergeant will help supervise these community officers, but right now we have one of the sergeants, if you refer back and can go remember the slide I showed at first that talked about Sergeant Max Morgan. Sergeant Max Morgan he's beyond span of control for the supervision, the job he needs to do. He has too many people underneath him. I mentioned we are also very lean on our administrative side of the house. We have plenty of patrol guys, we have 68% of patrol guys, and which is, according to the staffing, according to that ICMA study, it's above what the national average is. But we need to have one more per team to bring us up to 5 instead of just 4. And then I need a sergeant, and Max needs some relief. He supervises too many people. And so my request is going to be for the 4 patrol deputies, the 2 community-oriented police deputies, and the 1 sergeant for a total of 7. I mapped that out here just a little bit more. Why I need the patrol sergeant, current supervisory load exceeds best practices and help restore proper supervision and leadership. Patrol deputies asked for 6. The study recommends 8 to 10. Do I think we need 8 to 10? I do think we need 8 to 10. Financially, I'm trying to be aware of at least be somewhat fiscally responsible of how Eagle Mountain stands right now and where you are as far as taxing and so forth. But you need 8 to 10, but I think right now on patrol deputies, an increase of 6 would bring us to a level that I think is doable. It brings us to safe staffing levels on patrol to ensure reliable response. The community officers can address repeat calls, neighborhood and business engagement, proactive enforcement, and reduce long-term demand on patrol. The last sentence kind of, Councilmember Clark, addresses what you were asking. Community-oriented policing strengthens trust between deputies and residents, proactively addressing neighborhood concerns, reduce crime through problem-solving partnership, and enhance overall public safety and quality of life in your community. Here's the cost breakdown. 1 sergeant, 6 deputies is going to cost an additional approximately $1.44 million. This is going to bring our saturation index to about 55 to 60%, slightly higher than that during the peak hours, but that's about where you're at. I think we call that fairly comfortable. It's doable for now. What that number brings us up to is 0.55 per residence. I still think we're below, but I think we're getting up there where we can be reasonably. We can talk more next year when it comes to budget requests and manpower requests, but I think 0.55 starts to bring us up to where Eagle Mountain is right now. Maybe to answer Councilmember Wood, your question of I don't think it's crime that's causing the big problem right now. Is crime going up? It is, but you have the number of residents that are growing up as well, or growing as well. So, but I think it brings it to a reasonable number. Again, Lehigh City's at 0.7, Saratoga Springs is 1.1. If you look around the national averages, they're higher than that. But if you look at some of the other cities that we've looked at in this county with Provo and Orem, they have a much bigger downtown, much bigger daytime traffic problem, but they're sitting at about 1.1 per thousand residents as well. So, do I think 0.55 is high enough? Not yet, but it definitely gets us to a place where our guys can breathe a little bit and maybe do some more proactive stuff around Eagle Mountain, and that's needed. So I wanted to break this down because I know it's been brought up a couple times in the city council. I just want to clarify some things in case you guys don't know this. I think you're probably aware of it, but I want to be clear on kind of how your contract monies are spent. The average deputy, and the way the contract is sent out is we basically take the lowest end deputy and the highest end deputy and we say what's the average that they're making, and then we times that by the number of deputies that are working out here. So the average cost for the deputy out here in your contract with benefits and salaries is about $140,000. And then on top of that, you're getting billed for the motor pool portion of it. Utah County bears the responsibility of spending the money to purchase those cars. Eagle Mountain spends the money to basically pay the recapitalization costs on those over the next 4 years. We trade those cars in to get new vehicles. Some of that equipment stays with the vehicle, a lot of it doesn't. Radios typically stay, light bars will stay for an extra cycle on that rotation, but they also need to be rotated out eventually as well. They have radar equipment inside the vehicles, video equipment. The deputy themselves has body cams and some other stuff. So it breaks it down what all of those costs are or most of the costs that apply on that contract. The 4th bullet point talks about administrative costs. You deal with your HR costs, evidence, crime labs, crime scene costs, records bureau. That's all lumped into kind of your overhead costs as part of that contract. And also they cover our crime reporting system, which is Spillman, our liability insurance per deputy. That's required by law. Most states or most agencies around the state are paying that. I believe that's about $1,100 a year that every single officer and deputy in the state has to cover, and the cities and counties are paying that fee, but it's per deputy is what they're paying for. That's required. And then, of course, there's a little bit of that money that goes towards SWAT response, SAR response, canine. For those of you keeping up here, you know, we had a big call down at the new QTS building this last Friday of a bomb scare. You had, I think, 6 canines from around the county, including other agencies, and then you had other personnel that responded on that call, and a lot of those fees will cover some of those response from those entities. You also have drone, which is part of that. We do have a full-time drone guy working out here that's part of the drone team, and so that's all part of that service. So total cost per deputy is about $200,000, and the sergeant's about $240,000. That's where the number came up. 1.44 million was basically that cost of the 6 deputies along with the 1 sergeant. So from the sheriff, I've had a lot of conversation with him about Eagle Mountain and the contract. He values this contract. He values the citizens of Eagle Mountain. And he has an expectation of the service that we're expected to provide to the citizens, but more importantly, he hears quite often the expected level of service the citizens want in their community. He was here last night. He spoke with the citizens of Eagle Mountain. They have an expectation. They voted you in to kind of meet those expectations, and right now I think we're short. We're coming up short on the level of service we want to provide the citizens of Eagle Mountain. And I think adding some of these deputies, these 7 staffing plan requests, gets us closer to where we need to be. And so we talk about wants and needs. This is a need. This isn't a want. I think the want, we get into the higher numbers. But right now it's a need. For me personally, my question to you is what do the citizens of Eagle Mountain value? And when you talk about increasing our staffing plan for law enforcement services, what type of law enforcement do you want? What do you value? And we want to provide the best service for you guys, and it's tied directly to staffing. We have some of the best, and in case there's other cities listening to this, which they're probably not, but I'll tell you, I think we got the best group of deputies in this county, if not the state, and around the country. And they do an amazing job. They're young, they're motivated, they love being out here, being part of Eagle Mountain, and the level of their service they're providing is incredible, I think. I think if you look at Google reviews, we do okay. So again, that's at the very end I wrote, let's keep Eagle Mountain a great place to live. I think it's a phenomenal place, and I think the citizens have an expectation. And that's kind of my presentation. I put on one more slide, and I'm going to click to it, because a discussion point came up about, I think it was Councilmember Clark that asked me a while ago about the impact of big businesses coming here. And you have a couple more big businesses coming here, but you just had a big business open up its doors in Walmart. And so I thought, can I gauge how this affects law enforcement? I can only run stats, and I can tell you from stats, is there an impact on law enforcement services provided to Eagle Mountain? Does this impact our law enforcement needs? So just for fun, I put together this. I wanted to go through in 2025, quarter 1, 2, 3, and 4. So it's just, January, February, March, quarter 1, and then we go on from there. This is in a grid surrounded. This is not calls for service to Walmart. This is in a grid where Walmart is located. I simply said, how many police incidents did we have in this grid in the first quarter of 2025? We had 61 or 62. That can be traffic stops, that can be traffic accidents, that can be calls for service, a theft, or anything. But in that grid, this is our grid that we use in our law enforcement mapping system. We had 62. In quarter 2, we had 63. In quarter 3, when Walmart opened in August 27th, we had 108. And in quarter 4, we had 141. That is not a reflection on what Walmart is doing good or bad. It's simply the impact that it has there on law enforcement and all calls for service in that specific area. Between quarter 1 of 2025 and quarter 1 of 2026, there's a 73% increase. It's one portion of the city. This does not mean things are going downhill in that area. It's not. It's just simply more traffic, more people doing more things. It's impacting us. When new business comes here, like a Lowe's, a Smith's in the south end of the city, it's going to impact us. It's going to impact our law enforcement and our ability to respond effectively in times of need. We can handle all the traffic accidents in the world, but when you have a Part 1 or Part 2 crime or a Priority 1 or Priority 2 crime, we get tied up and our response times become slower. So again, I'll leave with you the thought of there is a want, and I want more guys. I want a lot more guys, but there's a need, and 7 almost meets that need. At minimum, I think a 7 is a reasonable request for the residents of Eagle Mountain, very reasonable. What they need is more, but 7 is a reasonable request. So, questions?
So if a backup unit comes from another city, who pays for that? Is that time tracked and then?
No, it's tracked on data. It's not tracked on payment. Each city, it's part of just kind of an interlocal agreement. It's nothing signed. They don't sign a agreement between other agencies. It's just what they do. And we do it in reverse sometimes. There's a difference between Utah County Patrol units and Eagle Mountain Utah County Patrol units. We're 2 different agencies, essentially. Even though we both work with the sheriff's office, we handle calls here. But occasionally you get a call out in 5 Mile Pass and we're the closest person there and there's somebody with a life-threatening injury. We're going to go on that if we're available. We get there, we don't take the call, we just handle the emergency portion of the call. Utah County deputies will show up and handle the actual call. They will spend the hours on report writing and follow-up, going to the hospital, arresting somebody if need be and booking them into jail. We won't do that. We will just simply go out there to help. Saratoga will do the same for us quite often. We'll get backed up on calls, we'll need a backup officer, and they'll come into our city and they'll assist with backup. That is not a payment thing. We don't, Eagle Mountain or Saratoga wouldn't charge us, and when we do that for Saratoga, we won't charge them. It's just an understanding between the 2 agencies.
And then a question on the animal control. So when your officer goes out on animal control, someone's animal misbehaved, is there a fine that's getting issued to that animal owner to compensate for the time that we need to spend for your services there?
No, there's a citation that can be issued, but we don't charge them on an animal control call. We go out and handle the call. Now, if the animal gets placed in one of the animal shelters, they're going to have to pay a fee to get the animal out, but there's not an additional charge for to come out there and handle an animal control call. Unless a citation's issued, then they're going to have to pay that fine for the citation.
Is your animal control officer also a law enforcement officer?
They're part of the patrol numbers we gave you. Yeah, so you have, Utah County changed that some years ago. Animal control used to be just, it was still a law enforcement officer when on duty, but they were paid less and only handled animal control calls. It changed many years ago. Now for us out in Eagle Mountain, we have 2 animal control officers, but they are patrol deputies. They're full-fledged patrol deputies, and when things get busy, they handle patrol calls. But in Eagle Mountain has its fair share of animal calls. And so we warrant 2. We probably could warrant, this would be a want. Yeah, could we deal with another animal control guy? Absolutely. We have 2. We're trying to get them set up so they work basically 7 days a week. Not 24/7, but we try to keep them in that Monday through Sunday. We want them on duty at some point just because of the amount of animal control calls we get here. There's a lot, so.
Can you go back to that first slide? That it was one of the first slides that kind of showed that breakout of, yeah, essentially. And you know the animal control guys. I think Jim Bingham, one of our longtime, he's the ACO in that chart. And
so Jim's been around for a long time. We have another guy named Walkinshaw. Unfortunately, Deputy Walkinshaw came here a couple years ago, and or a year ago. He's now put in his 2-week notice. He's going to go to Salt Lake City, and so we'll be short on animal control until we get that filled. He absolutely great guy, but he received a great opportunity to go up to the county north, and Salt Lake City is going to pay him accordingly, and so. We're going to lose him soon, which is unfortunate, but we'll get hopefully a replacement for him soon, get us at full staffed again. Okay, there's the slide. You have a question, Mayor?
I didn't particularly. I just wanted them to see kind of what this was going to do. So these 4 to the right, he's asking for a 5th guy on each one of those blue slides. You got a sergeant, a 5th guy. Max Morgan's on the left. So splitting, maybe you could explain how you split that. So 2 SROs under each sergeant with a new, and then 1 ACO under each and 1 traffic, or what's?
We would leave them as groups together, so Max would probably continue to do the SRO and the ACO. The goal is to take a community police officer and the traffic. They sometimes can work real well hand in hand, because a lot of times the issues we're dealing with neighborhoods are traffic enforcement issues. And if you assign our 2 community-oriented officers to work with citizens in the community, and if they need to utilize the traffic unit, they can each go through their same sergeant. So typically it'll be 1 sergeant over 2 COPs and 2 traffic units is ideally what we'd like to see.
Chief, thanks for this information. How long have you worked in Eagle Mountain, or kind of overseeing our?
Well, that's a trick question. No, it's not a trick question. I was assigned out here a long time ago as a sergeant. Corey Wright and I were sergeants together way back in the day. We were opposing shifts as the 2 sergeants out here. Then I left after a while, and I've been out here since January of last year.
Okay.
So just a year and a few months.
Okay, that benchmarking data is really helpful for me to just understand where other cities sit for deputy or sergeant. I'm not going to get the language right. Deputies per population. I'm curious if that number has changed over time, or has it been getting worse? Was there a point in the past where we were at 0.7 and we just have not been adequately funding our sheriff's office? And it's getting to where we're having
Early on,
money,
yeah, when
like
the
we're
first
just super thin and tight on the budget.
When the city was first created, we had some deputies that would come out and take calls, and eventually we started to assign people out here. Eventually you got a sergeant, then you had 2 sergeants, then pretty soon you had 3 sergeants, administrative sergeant, and you always had a lieutenant over it. And then you had deputies that were assigned out here. But at first, it was probably close to 0.7, 0.8 way back in the late 90s, early 2000. But then that started to change, and what happened really is over the last couple of years, I think it's in 2 years you increased by 17 or 18,000 in population, and then more than that as you went back further. You can still see, I think the increase is about 6.7% population increase over the last 3 years. And I think because of budgeting issues, and very understandably so, that number's gone down. So you dwindle down. When I first got here, I think we were at about 0.49, 0.5 last year, and then because of shortages on requests, it went down from there, and now we're at 0.45.
Yeah,
And,
okay.
Yeah, and so that, I made a comment about, we don't want to become a big city. What happens if you're not careful and we continue to drop like that, a couple things are going to happen. You're going to have sticker shock to the citizens when you tell them we don't have a choice. And you're going to have to increase manpower. The worst case scenario, tragedy happens, which causes cities to then throw a lot of money at law enforcement. I think every chief in the country will say, we don't want something tragic to happen before the city council takes action. We would like to see action taken before tragedy strikes. And then we don't want you to turn into a city. If you ignore the numbers of law enforcement officers needed in a city, pretty soon you do run into the risk of becoming that big city that you don't want. You don't want the crime to start to take over. You don't want people to be, doing things in communities that disrupt your livability. You don't want your quality of life to diminish in the areas that you're living in, and the people that are moving here. They have an expectation of quality of life. And if we're not careful on not paying attention to the number of officers you need in a city, that'll diminish. And we don't want that to go down. We want quality of life to either to stay or get better. So,
Thank you.
yep. You were a lot tougher last time.
I already beat you up.
You did.
Make no mistake,
Yeah.
I had to ask him if he needed a cry room for a minute. It wasn't that bad.
Yes, it was, but no, it wasn't bad at all. But your questions, Mayor, are great. All of your questions are great. And if you have more, I'm happy to answer them. Again, I'll stick back to the comment I made before is there are needs and there's wants, and we know what that means. This is no longer a want. The city needs it and needs it desperately.
Can I just share a comment, not a question? Just an observation that I've had living in Eagle Mountain for almost 20 years. Our property taxes have not increased from the city. We have not kept up. So the property taxes that I pay today on my house are the same as what they were 10 years ago. But the cost per deputy that covers my neighborhood, that has increased. And so while people see populations coming in and new growth, that doesn't really keep up for the fact that the property tax has not been increasing on a lot of homes in Eagle Mountain. And I don't think a lot of citizens really recognize that. And so this ratio, what you just shared with us, is we probably started out at a 0.7% coverage ratio. That's what I'm going to call it. Now we're at 0.45. And because we have not kept up with the cost of inflation, we're now behind. Now we're getting to the point where it's like we need to hire 7 deputies, sergeants. Like, it's just going to continue to get worse unless we really address the fact. And I would agree, this is a need, not a want. Like, safety in our community is probably the highest priority I think that I have. Roads, safety, those are things that governments should be addressing, and I think that's what our citizens kind of expect us to be watching. So I appreciate your presentation. Can I get a copy of this?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Matter of fact, I'll email it to all of you as soon as we're done.
Just to kind of piggyback on that, I want to give you a little context. And I know Chiefs know, when McDowell was here earlier, and probably right around your first year-ish, Colby and Carolyn were still on council. We were at the 1 per 2,200, and we increased that year. Just out of my head, I came up with a number of 1,750, which both McDowell and I think Knutzen agrees that today is a pretty, that gets us to that 0.65-ish, 6.4 was it? I can't remember, per thousand, right? And we got there. The problem is the next day we built another house. So it's only been 4 or 5 years when we got to that number. Then the second part, though, that I think is interesting, because our citizens say, well, you're increasing my taxes because we have to add officers because of growth. But what you pointed out was that your taxes haven't gone up forever, and inflation. So I think the difference is that same officer, the last time we raised taxes, like 2003, I believe, which we'll learn from Kimberly, is paid more today. So you're not increasing taxes to pay for more officers, you're increasing to pay for the one that's still covering your house. And the new people are paying more to add to the other 7. So kind of the context on how that works. So Brett had a comment and we'll come right back.
Yeah, just some thoughts. I mean, I've been here a couple of years now. This is my 5th budget season. And it seems like every year that this is a topic that we come to and that we address. And we've really tried to be sensitive, Councilmember Hughes, to make sure that we're giving them what we can, but within budget constraints. And I think, so the process of that is, and I remember Chief McDowell standing there and Mayor Gray at the time on the council, and we had this very robust debate and discussion about, well, what's the number? And I don't remember the exact number that he asked for, but we had a discussion and we added 2 more to the budget, 2 more than Chief McDowell asked for, because it is a priority for us. The problem comes from the funding mechanism is not keeping up with the demand. And so our citizens, they say, well, but you're adding all of these new people who should be paying for that. And they are, but they're paying for it at a rate that's 20 years old. That's the problem. And so we're having to make up that shortfall from other funding sources. And so everything suffers. The sheriff's department suffers in their personnel, so does our city staff. And our ability to meet the basic needs of the city are becoming more difficult, not less difficult. And so I mean, here's what's going through my mind and some of the questions I wrote down. I thought, he wants 7. What can we do to provide 8 to 10? I'd really like to know, how can we modify this year's budget to give him the 8 to 10 that he really needs? And I don't know what that means or where we'd have to cut. And that's probably what we're looking at if we choose to do something like that, is where are we going to claw back $600,000 if we're going to add 3 more deputies beyond the 7 he's requesting? And then how are we going to fund it? Because it's an ongoing cost and expense. And I know Kimberly's going to talk to us a little bit about that, but that's the seriousness and the weightiness of what we're really dealing with. And now, having been here 5 years, I'm understanding this a little better than I did in year 1, perhaps year 2. And being a property tax owner and an owner of a rental home in Eagle Mountain, I don't want to see my property taxes go up, but they haven't for 22 years while I've been here. They have for every other taxing entity but the city of Eagle Mountain, every one of them. I mean, they've gone up significantly because they've needed to meet their needs, and they haven't postponed that like we have. So I think there's some room for growth and discussion, but that's the question I'm gonna ask each of you to consider is, what would it take to get to the 8 to 10 that he really thinks he needs to provide that level of service? Because if we're not providing adequate policing services, why are we sitting here?
That's kind of along the lines of where I'm heading. I don't think this is going to be a surprise to you. I'm disappointed that we have not built this into our system, frankly. I mean, I think as a citizen, I'm not even going to speak as a city council member. As a citizen, there's an expectation that I have of public safety. And that's the number one thing for my family. Roads, water, sewer, that all comes after the fact that I want to know that my kids can play in my front yard without having to worry about me sitting in the front yard to make sure that they're going to be safe the whole time. And I think that that's what our citizens expect. And I don't mean for this to sound negative. It's going to sound negative. But this is my third budget season now, and it seems like public safety is an afterthought every time. To me, and I'm hearing this from the citizens, this is the first priority. This has to be the very first thing on our list of things to take care of, and then we're gonna have to make everything else work. To Brett's point, I agree. 8 to 10 is what we should be shooting for. It's not even an excess, it's just to get it to baseline. I don't think that's an unreasonable expectation by our citizens. So I agree, I think it's something that we need to, this budget, figure out a way to do that. But we need to put a mechanism in place. And if that is a tax increase, then we need to tell the citizens this is the reason why. Yes, we're increasing. I've watched this budget discussion Saratoga Springs is having online right now. And it really is kind of laughable, actually. How naive citizens have become about how things are paid for. Yes, you're increasing number of households, but your liability goes up. Your public safety goes up. And that's just to cover your house that you just built. That doesn't account for the fact that the people have to be paid a living wage that's commensurate with what that job requires. And to Zach's point, or Brett, maybe, I can't remember which one of you said that, we're paying it based on a 2003. That's ridiculous. And so we get sticker shock every time we see $250,000. We're like, well, God, we can't, that's $1.5 million. Yeah, that's what it costs. There's different equipment that's available now. They're not just walking around with a radio and a gun anymore. They have equipment that they're wearing on themselves. They have equipment that's in the car that records and provides safety for them, but also one that goes to court so that the person that is being arrested, that their rights are being protected, but also that the law enforcement officer that's doing the arresting is being protected. We can't keep having this discussion like this is an afterthought. It's, to me, the mechanism needs to be put in place by us. The policy makers, it can't just be approving a budget. We need to put a policy in place that as we grow, we're going to increase by this many officers every single year. And if it becomes to a point where the contract is now too expensive for us to do, then we evaluate at that time. But at that point, we should be having that discussion of how do we get to the number we should be at. If we're supposed to be at 48 officers and we're at 20, what did you say the number was right now?
We're at 35 total.
35 total. And how many sworn?
That's at 35 sworn.
35 sworn. So we're already deficient by 13 where we ought to be. We need to do a public relations program to get out to our citizens and let them know, number one, what the cost of this lifestyle that they enjoy is. That's number one. And public safety needs to be at the very beginning of that discussion. Number two, there is a cost associated with living a peaceful life, and it is the taxes that we pay. Our taxes from Eagle Mountain haven't gone up, and this misnomer that our taxes keep going up is caused by other agencies. And yes, that's part of life too. You have to pay for schools, and you have to pay for the fire services that we have and for the county. They will continue to go up, yet we continue to not raise our taxes, and our costs are going through the roof. We're looking at the same type of problem that we had with our sewer and our water. And we're acting like we can just keep band-aiding this. I think the time has passed for us to do that, and we need to be serious about this as we were about raising the fees for our water, raising the fees for our sewer. We have to fund our public safety.
Excuse me. I wholeheartedly agree with all of the comments that have been made by the council. I mean, police and public safety services are our essential core. As far as you look at our model and the essential services we provide and the quality of life we provide and the economic prosperity provide, all of that's built on a foundation of public safety. And if you're looking at the funding of public safety, if that is your core value, then your core revenue stream, which is property taxes, really should equate to that. Now, I know there's a discussion right now, it was just mentioned here a few minutes ago, well, maybe we need to make cuts in other places. I think what we're seeing is that we don't, Kimberly has said it many times, we don't have an expense problem, we have a revenue problem. We are not keeping up. And so for years we have run lean. There's really not the area to cut in other areas to make this happen. What we need to do is create a policy like Councilman Wood has just said, we need a policy that is perpetuated over time. And if that is to have public safety tied to public property taxes, we have to recognize that in the state of Utah, we do not have a cost of living adjustment in our property taxes. COLA does not affect, you can go to, I don't know how many of you got a notification that your Netflix bill went up, or that your Disney Plus bill went up, or that you pay more at the gas pump, or you pay, this hits you all the time, all the way through. But people will complain about local government. They won't necessarily complain about these other areas. And yet, the cost to the sheriff's office department alone just for fuel is an issue with a city of our geographic size. And so if we're going to do this, we need to do it with a policy that's in place. And I look at Saratoga Springs and I say, Saratoga Springs, they have a very admirable policy that they used to have 57 or 58% of their public safety covered by property taxes, and it has gone down, and they're just trying to get it back up to that area. My question when the mayor brought that up to me was, well, where's the rest of it being paid? Well, and the mayor answered me, he said it's being paid from other general fund sources. Well, what are those other general fund sources? They're sales taxes. Well, who's paying those sales taxes? It's the 70% leakage rate from Eagle Mountain City into Saratoga and to Lehigh and whatnot. We're paying that difference so that they're at 100%. And so the more we have Walmart, the more we have Smith and Lowe's and whatnot, the less that's going to be impactful. It'll create a greater workload, but it'll mean that we're leaking less dollars out. But we should never be putting our public safety at the risk of the fluctuation of sales. It should be a core value tied to a core resource, and those two should be married together. And we weren't intending to talk about our long-term, our how to get there. That's probably going to be for the next budget meeting. Today we're talking about public safety and transportation. We'll do that in the next budget meeting. But we wanted to make you aware that we have a fundamental issue that needs to be corrected, and policies need to be put in place. And while it might be admirable for the councils of the past to look back and say, I didn't raise property taxes, that has really set us up as a city to be at the very fragile state that we're in today that you've inherited. So good financial stability. You look at Provo and other agencies, they have not only high sales taxes because they're an economic base, and they have good fees for services and whatnot, but they also have high property taxes because they're a fiscally sound, well-managed city with diversified revenue sources.
While you're thinking, I'm going to add something to that, and this is just a comment, and then I want to bring it back to kind of how we tackle this. But last night I went to that debate, same meeting that Sheriff Smith was at, and every single person stood up there and said, I won't raise property tax, or boast that 8 years, I've never raised property tax, and every time I would holler out, irresponsible. All you did was kick the can down the road for us to do it. And so, as much as I don't want to just raise taxes, anybody that boasts that they never raise tax just means that they left the problem for someone else. Now, with that, what I want to bring back to the discussion a little bit is then how do we tackle this with either 7 or 8 or 10? I wanted, especially for you guys that haven't been here, when maybe Councilmember Wright and I kind of tackled that with McDowell, and I don't know how I came up with this because I didn't know what I was doing, but I said, is there a way to do half now and half later? And we said, okay, let's give him the 4, I think, that he asked for in the budget year, which would be a July hire, and then 2 more in January mid-year, because that only costs us half the year's salary, and then it's an ongoing expense. So what I would float out there is some kind of, I'm just telling you guys to think about how you want to do it. I think that each team needs to have 5 people. So I think that immediately as funds come in, don't have a heart attack, Kimberly, immediately, as we've discussed, might be September, not July, before we actually get this going, and that's a conversation for later, right? But that we maybe look at the 4 deputies to add 5 to each team. I think that, I understand that Max is overworked, but I know that he's tough, and that he can go maybe till January is what I'm getting at. And then you add, and maybe instead of 3 more, we add 4 more, or a 5th one if we get to that. But I'd say 4 and 4 gets us 8. Do the 4 deputies to make sure people are safe, because I think that, to me, that's the first concern. And then workload on our proactive stuff might be a mid-year thing. So go over here and then back.
Okay, so I just want to cover 2 points. Point number 1, how we get there, like I said, we're planning on talking about in the next meeting, and so we can get into that, because we don't want to get into the minutia. We definitely want to, we have a hard stop at 5, so we want to make sure you have time to go over your transportation information. But the second thing is, the mayor touched on something about September versus July. There has been a change to state code this past year, and because of that change in state code, whatever you might do or choose to do when it comes to a property tax has to go through that truth and taxation process that we know you would need to go through. But state code changed so that you cannot spend any of those dollars until the truth and taxation process is over, which is now 30 days after your public hearing in August, which would be September anyway. So we just want to make sure it's really clear that if you make any kind of changes, how you go about, you can decide that later. But if you do, it's likely not going to occur until September anyway.
I just want to bring up a couple other things, maybe good for citizens to know, and that is, today, under state of Utah law, it's not legal for us to separate out commercial property tax and residential. If you have property taxes, you can't break it up and say, well, we're just going to have property tax for commercial and not for residential. And there's a ratio, what is it, 50 cents to $1? Residential to?
The only difference is your primary home gets a reduction, a 55% reduction on your first home if you live in it and the whole bit. Commercial and it's 45, 55, that's right. 45% reduction. 45% reduction on your primary home. Your secondary home, your rentals and things like that, no, and commercial has no reduction.
So you get a TIF on your home of
Yes.
45%.
Yeah.
On your commercial, you pay it at 100%.
That's right. So for those that are thinking, just increase taxes on the businesses. They're creating income. My home is not creating income. That's a state of Utah law issue, and that's one thing I've brought up with John Magnus this next year, is to push the legislature to have a split tax, to give the cities the ability. Like we've been talking about data centers, hearing about data centers and all the revenue that's going to come pouring out of data centers. And, eventually that will be a reality, but that's not a reality today. Right now, what we have in front of us is there is a need, and we have to find a pathway there. That may be a property tax increase. But I just want to clarify that for the record so citizens know property taxes were tied with commercial. So if we increase it for residential, it's going to increase commercial and vice versa. It's not a split tax.
It's probably also important to note that each of the data center agreements that we have with RDAs and whatnot have it in there contractually that we can't change property tax only on that. Even if it wasn't a state of Utah law, we can't change it only on them unless we change it citywide anyway.
Well said. Thank you.
So I think, I don't know that I understand it exactly, so I want to clarify. I know what you're saying, but so that people understand, let's say we raise the tax by $1. What we do is rate tax rate that's going to cost the residential unit $1. What you did is raise $1, you give 45 cents back to the other person. So the business still pays the full $1, but you only pay 55 cents as a homeowner. So if you raise it $2, the business pays $2, you only pay $1.10. So it does go up more for every dollar you collect more in the other side. So even though the number's the same, you get a rebate for everything you go up. So I want to make sure that that's clear, that the rate that is levied is the same, but then the rebate is still the same on the total levy.
Yeah, I understand that. I think in a perfect world where we're looking at commercial and we're excited about that growth. In a perfect world, we'd say, if it's commercial, they're making money, they have the means to produce the income to pay a property tax, where my grandma living down the road in retirement, her property is not producing any kind of income tax.
Sorry, I mean, that's what the discount on residential already does. That's what it already does. It's already set up that way.
Well, I'm saying to take residential to zero would mean that you'd have to take commercial to zero.
Yes.
And a split property tax, you'd have the ability to say, in the future, commercial pays property taxes, residents don't.
Yeah, but even though it's all, it's the same rate that's levied, I mean, and I know that you all understand it. It's 55 cents for a residential unit. It's $1 for every business unit, so.
I think,
I was at the same meeting that Mayor was at last night, and it was disturbing to me how quickly the candidates were like, I'm not gonna raise taxes, and I hate RDAs, and they're awful, and blah, 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 blah. And as we were driving home, I was ranting to my husband about the fact that they don't understand what has happened as a result of it and the taxes we collected before versus what we collect now. And I was also talking about the residential TIF. So I think that even my husband, who hears me talk about this stuff all the time, didn't completely understand the 55-45. So we probably need to do a better job of helping just everyone understand that. Thank you for the presentation that you gave, because over the last year, you and I have had many conversations about really helping us know what the ideal is, a baby step to that, and where we're at right now. And I think that you nailed it. I appreciate you breaking down what it costs per deputy, because there was some really bad misinformation that was shared, and I think that this is a better snapshot of that. For me, I agree that we should be shooting for that 8 to 10 range, because it just means that if we don't try for that this year, we're gonna end up having to do it in a subsequent year. And we don't know what the economy is gonna be like the next time we have to look at this. But for me, I also want us to prioritize getting the master offense list updated with Eagle Mountain law and citations so that we can be enforcing our city code. But I also see the need for us, as part of this whole conversation, to be looking at the cost of a justice court and moving forward on that, because we've been talking about that for over 18 months and we're nowhere closer to it. And I do agree that we should get serious about creating a policy about how public safety funding increases are tied to population increases. So I appreciate all the thoughts that have been shared, but I do want us to remember master offense list and justice court are key components to us addressing the concerns that the residents have shared with us over and over again.
Rich, did you have something? If it's, so you're good? I just want to make sure that to kind of pull this in, because we do have to get to transportation. Are there any, I know funding is kind of what's taking this over, and that's for a future meeting. So specifically on the needs and why and call volume and, you know, and you guys were way nicer than I was, the chief. But anything that we need to address that way so that we can get on to some of the other.
so I'll just be quick. I mean, basically, the reality of it is that there is a cost of service to have public safety. And as your population grows, that cost goes up. There's a cost per person to have a police officer available to come when there's an emergency. They're in an accident's happened in their home, somebody has perpetrated a crime against them, whatever those things might be. And to think that as the population grows that we're covering it with that is the same mentality we used to have, that we're gonna pay for everything by adding more rooftops. That just means our deficit gets wider and wider and wider every single year, and then we deficiently produce the number of law enforcement officers that are required for that, so that the next year it's even worse than it was the year before. That kind of mentality and policy, we have got to stop doing that. And it's not just public safety. We have been operating like that for so long, and frankly, if it really is that we have to have an unimaginable tax increase to get us back on track, then let's be responsible. Other city councils did not have the backbone to do it, and they're so proud of not raising taxes like that's some beacon to shine in the sky to say, I screwed all the future residents of this city. Because that's what's happened. And I take huge offense to listening to people tell us how they haven't raised the taxes. All you've done is make it so that we can't pay for anything. That's how things are paid for in a city, in a county, in the state, the federal government. They're paid for by the social contract we all make together as citizens for those services to be provided, and that's going to come out of two places: our pocketbook when we spend it, and our pocketbook where we live. And I don't love all the taxes, let's be clear on that, but I mean, what other options do we have? Do we just keep pretending like it's not a problem? And go, let's say we only give him 4. And then what next year? He needs 12, or he needs 18 next year. And so what are we gonna do, give him 6? Till it gets to the point where he's not wrong, where we've now created these pocket areas of crime that we need 25. And we start creating these areas where we need 30, because police officers don't wanna go into this area anymore because it becomes so dangerous for them to be in there. It is irresponsible, and we need to quit thinking about, oh, let's see how we can fit the public safety into the budget. The public safety should be first. Let's fix everything else around that, in my opinion. That has to be the first consideration. Let's get everything else to work around that so that we provide a safe, we don't have more roads, by the way. So you're gonna have more traffic on there, more accidents on there, more road rage, all of those things. Who's gonna solve that? We're gonna have individual citizens start doing that? Because that's really where we're sitting.
Mayor, I don't know if you're aware of it, but the planning commission canceled their work session for tonight, so if we do go a little over, it's not the end of the world.
It's up to you guys. I think the more we can get done, we're here, but.
I think Kimberly has a hard stop at 5. Just Kimberly has a hard stop at 5 for personal reasons, is the only thing. Yep,
All right, never mind, personal. Hard stop at 5, go.
for Kimberly.
Okay, so, no question, great discussion. Any last words?
I appreciate you guys letting me talk to you. I appreciate you hearing my requests. I shouldn't just say my requests. This is it's part of the sheriff as well. And he's passionate about this. He loves the city, loves the contract. He loves being the sheriff over the county. He's a great boss to work for. And so he brings to the table the same passion I have for the need to provide the best law enforcement services to the citizens of Eagle Mountain. I'll say it before I say it, I'll keep saying it. Eagle Mountain's a great place. It is a safe city. It competes with some of the other cities around here yearly for being the safest city or one of the safest cities in the state. And that's a good thing. We want to keep it that way. Law enforcement officers want to keep it safe. They don't want to go call to call. They want to clean the city up anywhere it can be cleaned up. They want quality of life to stay or get better. And my job is to fight for these positions. The second part of my job is to make sure that the deputies that work for me out here in Eagle Mountain provide the best level of service we can. And right now, they're doing a great job. And we want to continue that. And so, again, thank you for hearing me out. And if you have no further questions, that's all I have.
Was that the statement from the chief? You said he had a statement.
From the sheriff?
Yeah.
No, that was it. I said it earlier on there on the PowerPoint. He said a lot. But I just wanted to relay that he did talk about expected level of service. And the citizens have that. And they have it everywhere, but in Eagle Mountain, they really have it. And we contract, Utah County Sheriff's Office contracts with Eagle Mountain. And we want to provide what's expected of us at that expected level of services that the citizens want. And so we're here to do it, but we need help with people.
Yep. Well, thank you very much, and I hope you heard for all these guys, and I'll just echo that we agree that you are our police department, and I hope you feel supported, and let every single officer here know that we love and support and appreciate what they do for us as a community.
Thank you. We do feel that, by the way. We do. We absolutely do. And the recognition we get and the chance that I get to stand up here and celebrate some of the deputies that work here, I'll take advantage of it every chance I get. So thank you, guys.
Yep.